The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Blaby again, everybody. Now, I wonder how many of my viewers out there are familiar with the uber popular 1990s and 2000 TV drama series Heartbeat. Well, one of the guys who played a major character in that series used to live in this village. He also created another character whilst he was here that featured in a different kind of TV show. This is Sapcote. Sapcote Sheep Shelter. Today on TVI we come to the parish of Sapcote, located just a few miles away from Hinckley in southwestern Leicestershire. The unusual name means sheep shelter, and that comes from Anglo-Saxon times. However, there is another theory as to what its name means. Anciently, this was known as Sapcote, and some believe that meant soap village. The idea stems from the fact there was a remarkable well known as the Soap Well, which was renowned for its soft water. Womenfolk claimed they could do their washing in it without using actual soap. Sapcote would go on to be a relatively important centre for both framework knitting and for quarrying. Indeed, the landscape around here is scarred with evidence for the latter of those two activities. Some buildings in Sapcote are made from the local stone, such as the Methodist Church. The modern village possesses a few hints to its past. The playing field, for example, was the supposed site of a castle before it was levelled off in the 18th century. The local church has some memorials for the Bassett family, who once owned the village. Bill Maynard, the man who portrayed Claude Greengrass in the ITV drama Heartbeat, once lived here. When he did, he was also able to create another character whom he would portray on screen, and it was based on an actual person from Sapcote Working Men's Club. Let's find out who it was. Sapcote has been occupied since at least the time of the Romans. It was centred upon a Roman villa which had mosaic pavements and a bathhouse, and it was occupied continuously during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. We should not be surprised by this. There were loads of Roman-related sites nearby. The Roman connection here can still be seen thanks to the parish boundaries. Sapcote's eastern edge is a dead straight diagonal line because it follows the route of the Foss Way, constructed by the Romans in 47 AD from Lyme Regis to the Humber Estuary. Later, when the Foss Way was a toll road, there was a toll gate in Sapcote parish. It was located at the junction of the road to Frolsworth in 1814. So, the Foss Way has always shaped the village, although it's a bit less important these days. It just serves as a boundary now. The village itself has always been a cluster, based around the road from the Foss Way to Hinckley, which was a major Roman site. So, as you might expect, everything has grown up alongside that road. Let's zoom in and see what it had in 1900. The answer is quite a lot. The high street was very built up, as was the road that led to the church. Sapcote was certainly not a quiet backwater. It had some life to it. There was a school on the main junction, a church to the south and a chapel to the east. That chapel, though, isn't the one that's here now. There are loads of other things which suggest Sapcote was historically important. To the west, there's some earthworks shown. They are where a castle supposedly once stood. Today, that's now the playing field. Bassett Lane is also a clue. The powerful Bassett family once owned this village. There were almshouses too, which still stand near the church. Carver Hill cottages are still there as well, and they have a connection to London. In all, Sapcote was a busy little place, thriving with life everywhere you looked. It was almost a small town. When you look at the modern map, it has the appearance of a small town these days. Vast expansion to the north has turned this already bustling village into a pretty sizable settlement now, and its growth has encouraged some other bits and bobs to be built as add-ons. Put simply, we have a lot to cover in this one, and so our route is going to be pretty extensive. We'll start on Kirby Close in the modern housing estate and work our way south to the main crossroads. That is the dead centre of Sapcote, where the road from the Foss Way hits the road to Stanton. Then we'll walk around the middle of the village in a clockwise direction, returning to the junction afterwards. That will take in the old school, the church, the village hall, the library, the Red Lion pub, the War Memorial, and the site of the castle. We'll then branch out towards Hinckley so that we can cover the Sapcote Working Men's Club before crossing the playing field, or the castle site if you will, to Bassett Lane. That becomes Cook's Lane as you head east and ends at Carver Hill Cottages. From that point, it's a simple case of going up to the Methodist Chapel before returning to the housing estate. In all, it sounds really simple, but with so much packed into a small area, this one promises to be full of hidden bits here and there. So here we are in the big housing estate which defines the northern reaches of Sapcote village. On those maps, this simply wasn't here 125 years back. There has definitely been a lot of growth since those times. We'll cover this area more at the end, because everything of note here is in the south. That said, on the way south we have to pass a couple of shops at the end of Kirby Close. One of them is a hairdresser's and the other is a post office. A few years ago, the post office occupied the entire building. It's shrunk a little now. The cute little building next door is an old telephone exchange. Those shops are by no means the only ones to this village's name. Walking down Stanton Road, we're heading for the middle of Sapcote, defined by a crossroads where the roads to Leicester and Hinckley meet each other. On the junction, there's a lot more. This co-op is Sapcote's main general store. It's not a lot more than just a shop, but one thing I found quite interesting about this is the clock on its wall. I didn't find anything about it, but I thought it looked good. Sometimes admiration is all you need, I guess. Next door on Leicester Road is the old school. Officially, this was known as Sapcote Church School, and there's a tablet in its wall which says as much, facing the road. This is not the first school that this village has ever had. For that, you have to go back to 1614, but nobody knows exactly where that was. A later reference in records tells us there was a public schoolroom built in 1792, but that's not this. This was erected in 1819 and was endowed by John Fruin Turner, the local squire. It lasted until well into the 1960s before eventually being replaced by a newer one on Bassett Lane. Okay, so the parish notice board is on the wall of the co-op, so I've got that out of the way. It's one of these awkward boards that doesn't open without a key, so I've had to slot it underneath and it's landed upside down. So if anybody sees my card, you have to sort of do that to read what it says. Anyway, we're now going for a bit of a walk. The next landmark is quite a distance away. Between here and there, we'll talk a bit about what's made Sapcote the place it is over the past 200 or 300 years. Next up, it's the church, but it's a way. To get to it, we have to walk down the Leicester Road and along New Walk. By doing this, you quickly get a sense of how the village has evolved over time to those new houses we started with. Life here was very different 200 years ago. With the invention of the stocking frame, the lifestyle in most villages changed dramatically. Sapcote was no exception. Most people here had been employed in agriculture, but almost overnight, most of the thatched cottages in the village were converted for those who could operate a stocking frame. By 1779, over 85 frames were in regular use, for which the operators were paid 7 shillings a week. By the turn of the 19th century, more than 200 frames were in constant use. Completed products from Sapcote were sold to factories in Hinckley. There were some lesser practiced industries here. Milling was always a background thing, for example. A mill was erected in 1806 for the purpose of grinding corn. It was a tower mill and stood for almost 100 years before a group of youths burnt it down in 1899 on Guy Fawkes Night. In addition, Sapcote used to have a swampy meadow which was converted into an osier bed. From there, willows were grown for basket making, and that industry continued well into the 1960s. Cheese making and quarrying were also associated with Sapcote. More on them in a bit. The parish church of All Saints is the oldest surviving building in Sapcote today. It's built in a combination of the English decorated and perpendicular styles of the 13th to 15th centuries. There was an earlier church on this site, but only the Norman font remains from that predecessor. We do know a little bit about who was in charge back then. William Bassett appears as the patron of Rector Thomas Spencer in the last decades of the 12th century. A chantry was established by Ralph de Bassett in 1376, and today its chapel forms the present north aisle. At one time, the church windows had the Bassett coat of arms and devices in glass, but those of the chancel window were removed in 1788 and only a fragment now remains. At the same time, a stone coffin, which probably belonged to one of the Bassetts, was opened and reinterred. The bowl of the circular font is Norman, the exterior being decorated with upright leaves. Overall, it's extremely uncommon as fonts go. The walls of the nave here are of local pink granite, but the ashlar-faced buttresses are of sandstone. The stonework in the south doorway dates from 1380. The tower is 60 feet high, and a slim octagonal spire rises a further 60 feet into the Leicestershire sky. In 1757, a tremendous gale necessitated the rebuilding of the spire. In 1804, it was struck by lightning and the weathercock had to be replaced. There are 10 bells in the tower. Only 3 existed until the Great Bell cracked on a feast day and was recast into 2. The resulting 4 were rehung on girders in 1721. Later bells were added in 1895 and 1977 before 2 more were donated. Sapcote is therefore one of only 2 villages to have a ring of 10. The clock on the tower was given by Mary Fruin Turner in 1793 and originally only had 1 hand. It was restored in 1853 when a minute hand was added, along with the words, "The hour is coming." They were inserted in gilded letters on the centre face. The building next door to the church is the Sapcote Church Hall, in effect the village hall. It's one of a number of communal venues dotted across the village, which include the library and the pavilion. This was opened in 1968, with much of the cost being met by a legacy from a Miss May Kirby. The little building next door to that is Sapcote Community Library, and the fact this is still here today is all down to the locals. The library was at risk after the county council announced it would scrap its funding in June 2017, but the people of Sapcote had other ideas. A community group stepped in and took over the management of the site and then called on residents to offer their time to help with its running. It seems to have worked because the library is still very much flourishing some 8 years later, and long may that continue. Okay, so opposite the library you've got this big building, that's the old rectory, and passing that, heading north again, we're heading now towards the Red Lion, which is next on our list. It's just there. And we've got this beautiful row of terraced houses on the left to walk past as well. Next on our list is the Red Lion pub. Now, Sapcote once had 2 inns, but today the Red Lion is the only one left. The other one was called the Lord Bassett Arms. The Red Lion, as well as being a pub, used to receive the post when it was delivered to the village. It was then duly collected by the villagers. Next to the pub is the Sapcote War Memorial. This was unveiled by Lieutenant Colonel R.E. Martin in 1921 in memory of the 24 men who gave their lives in World War I. In 1942, during World War II, Sapcote had a Women's Land Army hostel, which was only the second to Leicestershire's name. Now we've made it to the playing fields. Now, on the maps at the beginning of this episode, this area was shown to be the site of Sapcote Castle. In the 18th century, the small eminence which it stood on was levelled, and eventually the site would become these lovely, well-maintained fields. But was there ever actually a castle in Sapcote? Not everyone thinks so. As we know from the church a few moments ago, under Norman rule from the 12th to the 14th century, Sapcote became a seat of the powerful Bassett family. They were descendants of the Royal Justice, Ralph Bassett. It has been suggested that Ralph de Bassett, a different guy who lived some 100 years later, was possibly the first ever Member of Parliament. For sure, he was the first lord to be called to the Barons' Parliament by Simon de Montfort, and he served time as High Sheriff of Leicestershire. But where did the Bassets live? Well, the answer to that is a little difficult to come by. The Bassett family were extremely ancient and wealthy and owned the village for 3 centuries, although most historians will tell you they never actually resided here. And if they did, it certainly wasn't in the castle. Mostly, they lived in a gorgeous mansion within beautiful grounds near Thurleston, which was known as Bassett House. And that fact has puzzled historians for years. You see, there's not enough substantial evidence to suggest that Sapcote Castle ever actually existed. Now you see, this is the great thing about history. People will disagree all the time on various bits and bobs, and this board actually stops short of saying there was definitely a castle here in Sapcote. It does suggest there was, though. Let's have a quick read of it. It says, Sapcote is one of 3 castles in southwest Leicestershire which post-date the Norman conquest. Excavations have shown that the site contains many 12th to 14th century stone buildings. Occupation of the site continued well into the medieval period. Now this is the bit that seems to be a bit wishy-washy. At Sapcote, the manor house of the powerful Bassett family appears to have developed on the site of a Norman Motte and Bailey castle. Manor houses were often surrounded by moats. Now it's this line here, appears to have developed. You see, they're stopping short of saying there was actually definitely a castle here. It's not known for sure. What they do agree on, though, is it was levelled in 1778 and most of the moats have been filled in. As to what exactly was here, well, you can make up your own mind, but certainly nobody can agree if there was indeed a castle here or not. It's a fascinating piece of history, though, isn't it? Now we're on Hinckley Road and we're outside the Sapcote Working Men's Club. This might look a bit nondescript, but it's thanks to this very club that was built in 1910 that an extremely popular TV personality was able to create a well-loved sitcom. The man in question was Bill Maynard. Millions of people knew Bill Maynard as the lovable rogue Claude Greengrass in the ITV drama series Heartbeat, but before he was doing his best to avoid any trouble from Aidensfield Police Station as Greengrass, Maynard was the man behind another character, Selwyn Froggatt. For many years, Sapcote was Bill Maynard's home, even though he was born in Surrey and both the Greengrass and Froggatt characters were Yorkshiremen. Maynard had the initial idea for the 1970s sitcom which featured the latter. It was called Oh No, It's Selwyn Froggatt. Virtually every member of the sitcom's cast was based around a real person who attended Sapcote Working Men's Club. Maynard modelled Selwyn Froggatt on a man called Peter Wright, who was known for two catchphrases, magic and a pint of cooking and a bag of nuts. Both of those would become catchphrases for Selwyn Froggatt. Maynard later commented that creating a character like Selwyn from scratch was damn near impossible without modelling him on a real person. He was right, I think. The real characters in this world are the real people. A hop, skip and a jump down the road and we're at the pavilion on the northern edge of the playing fields. Sapcote Pavilion commands a view across the 8 acres of playing field to the village's name, with its own car park and its own changing rooms too. There are dedicated football, cricket and croquet pitches here, a fenced-in and fully equipped children's play area with picnic tables, and there are some facilities available for teenagers too. The pavilion can be hired most days and it's equipped with a kitchen and some toilet facilities. Now to cross the playing fields, and as we do, there's something else to tell you about this area. Today, a park such as this is a place where you can stroll, absorb the fresh air and admire the surrounding trees. That wasn't always the case. In medieval times, a park was something else. It was a piece of land enclosed by a strong high fence in which all the wild animals in the district were kept. Sapcote had one. It was situated in this sort of area, somewhere off the Hinckley Road, and it ran to 9.5 acres. Exactly where it was is sketchy, but there is a modern park road near here. In the meadow was a substantial dovecote, which records indicate was in existence as far back as 1581. All of this does suggest that Sapcote had a castle, or at the very least a fortified manor house. In any event, we're about to come onto Bassett Lane and we're off to find the primary school. In fact, on that board that was talking about the castle, there is a map and it shows that the park was most likely where I am right now, sort of on the cricket square. So somewhere here, this is where the park would be. It would make sense actually, because over the way there, you can see there's a street, that's Pinfold Close. And the research I did before I came here told me that the Pinfold was right next to the park. So it makes sense for it to be here then, doesn't it? Okay, let's get off this recreation ground, back onto terra firma. So, when the Leicester Road School closed down in the 1960s, all the pupils at it were transferred to this brand new building on Bassett Lane. This was built in 3 phases between 1967 and 1973. This school was originally known as Sapcote C of E, reflecting its ties to the older church school. However, now it goes by the modern title All Saints C of E Primary School. It has its own motto, which is simply guiding all our flock to flourish. The Bishop of Loughborough visited this school a short while ago in order to bless some new school buildings. Next up, we have Burroughs Almshouses. This delightful looking row at the rear of the church was built in 1847 in a Tudor revival style of architecture. They have an inscription which tells us they were named after the Reverend Stanley Burrough. They were built, though, by Thomas Fruin. Now we're on Cook's Lane, a short street that connects the church to Sharnford Road. It was on this very street where Bill Maynard lived. Now, I've no idea which house was his, but there aren't a lot to pick from. If you're not familiar with him, by the way, here's a bit more about the man behind Selwyn Froggatt. Bill Maynard was born Walter Frederick George Williams on the 8th of October 1928. He was a comedian as well as an actor. He took the surname Maynard after being inspired to do so after seeing a billboard for the confectionery Maynard's Wine Gums. He began working in television in the 1950s, notably starring alongside Terry Scott in Great Scott It's Maynard between 1955 and 56. However, he shot to stardom in the 1970s and 80s, starring in some successful British sitcoms, and of course, Oh No It's Selwyn Froggatt was one of them. He also appeared in 5 films in the Carry On series. After a short hiatus from television, Maynard returned to the screen. When he did, he took on the role of Claude Greengrass in the long-running television series Heartbeat from 1992 to 2000, arguably where most people know him from. It was Selwyn Froggatt, though, that gave him his first major breakthrough. After a pilot episode in 1974, Maynard took on the lead role in the sitcom for 3 series, followed by its sequel, simply called Selwyn, for one more series between 1976 and 1978. The role made him a household name. As Claude Greengrass in Heartbeat, he was always trying to stay out of trouble with the police. Heartbeat was set in Yorkshire in the 1960s, and it was a major success, consistently drawing over 10 million viewers for each and every episode. He remained with Heartbeat until December 2000, when he decided to retire from the programme following a series of strokes. Despite that, he returned to acting in 2002 to reprise his character in a spin-off series called The Royal until 2003. In October 2009, he made a return to the stage, which he'd been involved with before any of his TV work. He did so in an appearance as the main guest of honour at the Pride of Bridlington Awards. By then, though, his career was slowly starting to wind down due to his age and impaired mobility. Maynard was not a Leicestershire native. He was born in Farnham in Surrey, but his family moved north soon afterwards. As such, he spent a lot of time here, being educated at Kibworth Beecham Grammar School. Maynard lived in Sapcote during the latter part of his life. He was often seen to be using a scooter or a wheelchair as he aged. He died in hospital in 2018, not long after falling and breaking his hip. He's not buried in Sapcote. He was cremated at the South Leicestershire Crematorium in Countsthorpe, where his ashes were scattered afterwards. At the end of Cook's Lane, there's a terraced row. These are Carver Hill cottages. Look at them glancingly, and you might not think they're anything greatly special, but they are. They were built in 1882 and they're made of the local stone. Where they stand has a bit of history. In 1665, when the plague was rife in London, many people from the capital fled to Sapcote to find refuge. That they did, and this is where they settled. Carver Hill cottages stand on what was a piece of wasteland which is still known to the locals to this day as Little London. The name Carver, by the way, is also linked to quarrying. There were several quarries on the eastern side of the village, and one was Carver Hall. It was first excavated in 1770. During that operation, a tessellated pavement, Roman tiles, and a hoard of Roman and Saxon coins were uncovered. Also during the 1700s, Sapcote became famous for cheese. Over 30 tonnes were produced annually and sold at Leicester Cheese Fair. Centuries earlier, it's believed that cheese from the Sapcote Roman villa was sold to government centres which had been set up during that period. There has always been a tremendous amount of rivalry between Sapcote and Stony Stanton on account of the quarrying industry. Sapcote's 3 quarries at Carver Hall, Lovat's and Granitethorpe provided a livelihood for most of the village. Sapcote prided itself with its skilled set cutters. Sets were sent to all parts of the country, and quite a few of them were used in Leicester Town Hall Square. The first quarry to close was Carver Hall in 1880, which was filled in. Granitethorpe was closed in 1915 and Lovat's in 1924. Now we're at a stone-built Methodist church on Leicester Road. This is a Grade 2 listed building that was opened in 1905, and it's a fine example of something that was built during the arts and crafts period. Methodism in Sapcote, though, predates this chapel by a fair old distance. The Wesleyans built their first church in Sapcote in 1805, almost 100 years before this came along. They had a successful and active congregation in those days. By 1880, the village had something called the Sapcote Wesleyan Band of Hope, a temperance group in the Hinckley circuit. Come the early 1900s, a brand new chapel was required for Methodist worship, and this chapel was erected. The stone was quarried by the men who would worship at it, and they made such a good job of it that this remains as one of the best buildings in Sapcote today. Okay, on the other side of the road from the Methodist chapel, we've got a milestone. Here we go. This one says Leicester is 10 miles in that direction, and Hinckley is 4 in that direction. Always listed these structures. They're always worth finding as well. Useful things. Now, for the remainder of this walk, it's going to get all residential. We're going to go up Grace Road towards a place called Stony Stanton. We're not going quite into Stony Stanton because it's quite a long way. We're staying in Sapcote. So enjoy the housing if you can, and I'll see you in a moment. From the chapel, we're heading north now as we re-enter the huge housing estate where all this began. A lot of this is now residential, built mainly within the last few decades of the 20th century and the early part of the 21st. The newest bits are to the east of Grace Road. They include things like the Sapcote Scout Hut. We're going to stick mainly though to this street because it forms a neat little loop around these northern areas. Enjoy this little trip through the housing, and I'll see you again very shortly. Our final section takes us back to the start through a street called Spa Drive. This is one of those roads whose name gives us a clue as to what used to be here. Spa Drive is literally built on the site of a spa, although more accurately, it was a bathhouse. In 1806, the bathhouse was built by John Fruin Turner over the so-called Golden Well in Stanton Road. It was an attempt to turn Sapcote into a spa village where people could come and alleviate aches and pains via the wonders of water. In the building were both warm and cold baths. Treatment at the baths was given for nervous, rheumatic and scrofulous complaints. The The building cost around £600 and the beneficial effects of the waters were much approved. It was even used by 2 former Prime Ministers, George Canning and the Duke of Wellington. And if you know where to look, there's evidence all along the Stanton Road which tells you about the baths. There's several houses which have the word bath in their name. We just come past Bath Villa up there, and that house you can see behind me, that is the Bath House. So we are now all the way around Sapcote. However, there is just the one more thing I want to cover before we move on to the next one. Gonna need the car for this though. We have one final thing to see, and we're in the car for this. To the west of the village is Sapcote Garden Centre on the road to Hinckley. This started off as a small nursery back in 2001, and since then it's developed and expanded into a really good quality and very competitive garden centre. They are still very plant orientated and have an excellent selection of plugs, bedding plants and shrubs. Basically, they aim to give you some quality products for a lot less than the big chains. In 2016, they gained a brand new cafe, which so far has received some amazing feedback. It offers a range of hot drinks, hot food, snacks and cakes for you to enjoy, helping to give you a break from all that shopping. They haven't finished yet either. Sapcote Garden Centre's plans for the future include a children's play area to make a trip here enjoyable for the whole family. The car park has 100 spaces, including provision for the disabled, so there's really no excuse to not come and check this out if you're passing by. I have a reason not to though. We have more villages to cover. Join me tomorrow for a place that's far smaller than Sapcote, but it's just down the road. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.